So this morning we are celebrating, or maybe celebrating isn't the right word, we are existing in the second week of Lent. The second Sunday of Lent is this morning. And as we know, Lent is this 40-day journey toward Easter. And in this gospel passage, Jesus, there's really kind of two little sections of the story, right? The first one I'll talk about in a second is when Peter rebukes Jesus for Jesus telling his disciples what is about to happen. And the second one, it says, Jesus turns to the crowds and says that if anyone is to follow me, they must take up their cross. And so we are invited during Lent to take up our cross. I have a couple of crosses. In confirmation class last year, we were counting crosses in the church, and we lost count. We couldn't count all the crosses. There are a lot of crosses in the church, and so I have this cross, which is I think originally came from St. Faith, and it's a processional cross, and I like it because it says "Follow me" on the back. And so there's a way in which we can literally take up a cross and follow, right? When we do a procession, we follow the cross. And there's symbolism there because it goes back to this passage, right? I have this other cross, which we take out on Good Friday, and it's really heavy. Probably not as heavy as the cross that Jesus carried, but it kind of gets at the idea. And it reminds me of on Good Friday in New Mexico when people go on a pilgrimage to a little church in called Chimayo. It's this little town in northern New Mexico. And people walk from miles and miles around, 5 miles, 10 miles, 30 miles, even longer. And people sort of take this passage literally a lot of times, and they carry these big crosses like this, or even littler crosses. But there are people who will carry this big cross on their shoulders for miles and miles on Good Friday as a way of entering into the story, as a way of entering into the passion and trying to understand what Jesus has done for us. Now, maybe there's more to it than simply literally taking up a cross, right? Jesus was talking about something even bigger than that. And that bigger thing is what we like to call discipleship. Learning to take up our cross is really learning to be a Christian. And it is a journey. It's something that we don't decide to do just once. It's something that we decide to do over and over and over again. Learning to be a follower of Jesus. And it doesn't necessarily mean a literal cross. It doesn't necessarily mean following a cross in a procession. But it means making that decision over and over and over again to be a follower of Jesus. And that can look differently for us. But I want to propose that however it looks for us, the hallmark of taking up our cross and following Jesus is humility. And so back to that thing with Peter. Jesus is very harsh with Peter. He says, "Get behind me, Satan," right? What Peter was doing was Jesus is talking and he's saying, we're going to go to Jerusalem, I'm going to be arrested, I'm going to be betrayed, I'm going to be tortured, I'm going to be murdered, and then on the third day I will rise again. And the reason why Peter rebukes him is because Peter has in his mind a different picture of who Jesus is and what Jesus is going to do. Peter knows, in fact, in the passage just before this, Peter says, "You are the Messiah. You are the chosen one of God who is coming to redeem the world." And in Peter's mind, that looked very different. That involved war horses and throwing the Romans out of Jerusalem and establishing a kingdom, and it involved power, and it involved glory, and it involved wealth. It involved Peter and his friends being, hoisted up on people's shoulders and carried around as really important people, right? But what Jesus's description of who he was and what it meant to be the Messiah, to be the Redeemer of the world, was very different. It was a vision of humility instead of pride. And so I know a lot of you, or maybe I should say some of you, have from time to time carried these little crosses around. And they're symbolic, aren't they? They're not actually a cross that you put on your shoulder, but they are a little cross that you can put in your pocket. And I want to invite you, if you would like, during maybe this week of Lent, or maybe during the rest of the remaining weeks of Lent, that you carry this little cross around and think about what it means to be a follower of Jesus. Think about what it means to choose humility instead of pride, to choose the weakness of God rather than earthly power and the drive to obtain wealth and power at the expense of other people. Amen.
Amen.